From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. There's a trend in Colorado that has higher education officials concerned. The number of high school graduates is declining, and that means the state's colleges and universities are expecting a drop-off in enrollment in the coming years. Colorado is one of 36 states bracing for what's become known as the enrollment cliff. And the prospect of fewer students only adds to the pressures that many colleges and universities are currently navigating, like recent cuts to federal research grants or a drop in international students. Education reporter Erica Brunlin wrote about the looming enrollment cliff for the Colorado Sun. She joined me to talk about what's driving the problem and what state education leaders plan to do about it. You write that the coming college enrollment downturn can be traced back to the Great Recession around 2007. That's when economic concerns prompted people to put off having kids. So today we have fewer high school graduates. But that's not the only factor. What else is behind this projected decline?
Yeah, there are a few things, Erin. The biggest driver for sure is this decline in birth rates. But another factor that you mentioned is this drop in international students on U.S. campuses. Time magazine in May reported that enrollment among international students across U.S. universities for spring 2026 fell by 20% from spring 2025. So a very significant drop. Much of this drop is driven by the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration. Students are simply feeling fearful and uncertain about whether an education in the U.S. is the best route for them. This is taking a pretty big hit on higher ed institutions across the country because they rely heavily on international students to help cover costs. They often charge international students more tuition, so that really fills out their budgets.
Sure.
The last factor I'll cite is that only about half our students here in Colorado attend any kind of post-secondary education program. So we have a huge pool of students who are opting to not attend a higher education program after high school. And that is just adding to this whole enrollment decline.
You note that this enrollment issue will be especially challenging for smaller schools like Adams State University. How are they preparing to deal with this looming drop-off in incoming students?
You are right, Erin, that smaller schools across the country and across Colorado are going to be the ones who are most at risk. Adams State University has a pretty interesting story. Their president, David Tanberg, is not as worried about losing out on students in the future. He really talked to me about how the institution has existed to serve students from really tough backgrounds, kids who are first generation, kids growing up in poverty, kids who may have never seen themselves as college material. These students are the ones that Adams State University has really framed its programs and its resources around. And so as enrollment declines start to hit the country, we're also going to see the demographics of students change. And we're going to see more Hispanic students coming out of high school classes. We're going to see more first generation and low income students. And so he believes that the university has a little bit more of an advantage and a little bit more stability because the students that the institution is serving are the ones that we're going to be seeing grow in populations in the future. So he feels a little more sense of security around that.
Erica, you also spoke with officials from the University of Northern Colorado. How worried are they and how are they adapting?
Yeah, so University of Northern Colorado is not extremely worried. I spoke with the vice president of enrollment over there. His name is Pete Lean. And he said if you would have asked him a year ago if he was worried about an enrollment drop-off this fall, he would have been shaken in his boots a little bit. But as time has passed and we're starting to get closer to the school year, he said he's a lot more confident that enrollment numbers of first-year students at UNC will be pretty comparable to what they were last year. At the same time, he made this really big point that the future learner is going to be much more diverse than just your 18-year-old graduate right out of high school. He anticipates that we're going to see a lot more transfer students, a lot more students who are coming wanting to change their careers, students who don't necessarily want a 4-year degree, but might want more of a shorter-term credential, some kind of workforce certificate. With that in mind, he said UNC is really working to figure out how can we diversify and adapt our programs to meet this new learner? How do we rethink what we're teaching students, the hours we're teaching students, the ways we're engaging with them, so that we can really meet these new students where they're at and not simply continue to serve just 18-year-old students out of high school?
I'm curious, how does the prospect of a smaller pool of applicants change the way colleges and universities will go about attracting first-time students? I mean, does this turn into a battle of their marketing departments?
That is such a good question, Erin. I think it will be different for different institutions. You have community colleges, you have regional open access institutions like Adams State University and University of Northern Colorado. Then you have the really big comprehensive research institutions like CU Boulder. I did hear from multiple sources in this story that the landscape to attract students is going to become more competitive. Schools are really going to have to decide, what do we specialize in and what do we really broadcast about what makes our particular institution different. I think for big schools like CU Boulder, it will be less of a struggle simply because there is more brand awareness around CU Boulder. Whereas smaller, more regional schools like Adams State University might have to beef up their marketing efforts a bit just so that they are making sure that students are aware of them as much as they're aware of some of these other big name schools.
Let's zoom out for a moment. What does this moment in time reveal about the health and the future of higher education in Colorado?
I asked this same question to J.B. Holston, who is executive director of Colorado's Department of Higher Education. And we had this really interesting conversation about how there are so many kind of changing dynamics of higher education that are all converging. You have schools that are trying to figure out how to keep up with evolving workforce demands, trying to figure out how to roll out artificial intelligence across campuses. You have schools who have really had to figure out how to absorb federal funding cuts for research. And then there is this whole question around, is college worth it these days in light of higher tuition costs? And so what J.B. Holston told me is that higher education institutions are going through this great moment of change. He even said that presidents who he speaks to across the state really say that they're trying to find survival strategies right now. At the same time, he's confident that institutions will land in a new chapter because he said colleges and universities have this long history of having to constantly adapt and evolve to keep up with the changing needs of their communities. And so I think this is a moment where colleges and universities are really going to have to pause and figure out what programs are they wanting to specialize in, what kinds of students do their programs suit, and what are they going to have to do on campuses to really adapt to all the changes coming their way.
Erica Brunlin covers education for the Colorado Sun. She talked with me about the looming enrollment decline for Colorado's colleges and universities. We'll include a link to her story in the show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.